All right.
All right, so let's get going. I realize it looks like I haven't gotten through a lot of this book, but I'm telling you, at the end of this book, there's a big chunk of it that's really just back there for your review, to go back and look at, and I'll show you that piece when we get there. So my point is we're a lot further than what it may look like in the book right now, because there's a lot of spaces where it's just pictures and stuff that you're going to get to see, right? So let's talk about suspension real quick, right? Again, we're talking about estimating consistency, right? Questions to identify suspension, right? We're still going to ask our client when they bring it in, no matter how process-centric you get or what great tools you may have in your shop that measures this kind of stuff, you're still going to have a conversation with the client, right? And you still need to ask them things like, does it pull? Is the steering wheel straight when you're driving? Does it shake? Did you go off-road? All those kind of things, right? We're still going to ask them that. And really all those questions are just to help us identify where a problem might be so we can look deeper and try to figure out what's going on, right? Methods that we have to identify suspension damage. We talked about it a little bit earlier, but we use side-to-side comparisons. We use the hand in the fender well method, or again, if you're lazy like me, you just use your foot, right? Because your foot's the same size as your hand. Both sides doesn't make a difference. You can tell if it's back. The jouncing of the suspension, which I told you, that's kind of an old school thought process. You get the car bouncing up and down in the front, and the steering wheel starts shaking like this. That tells you the strut's bent. That actually doesn't really work on some of the later model cars, so don't necessarily think it's going to help you there. We look for flaking metal, right, on the part itself. On the knuckle, is the paint been flaked off? If the paint flakes off, then you pretty much guarantee the thing's got damage, right? Even if you can't see that it's bent. Visually inspect for bends, measure the wheelbase. If all you've got is a tape measure, I guess I'm okay with that, but there's better tools out there than a tape measure. Though a tape measure will tell you if you've got the right place, and it can tell you if something's not in place front to back, from side to side, right? Look at the angles of the wheels, the rim or the tire damage. I think we're all probably pretty good at that. When we need an alignment, when do we need it? When a car's spin is over 35 degrees, they still say. Obviously, if it pulls, tires are wearing unevenly, which of course we may not even see that depending on when we get this car in. Tires wearing unevenly. Now, if they went off-road and they've been driving it for a month and a half before they actually brought it to you, then sure, that might be the case, and that might be an indicator, right? We always got to do an alignment when we replace suspension or any kind of impact at all, right? Everybody totally in agreement. Now, the insurance industry may not agree with us all the time on when alignment is needed, but the reality of it is that's basically what most OEs say in a snapshot of when an alignment is needed, right?
When there's structural damage?
Surely when there's structural damage, for sure. Quite honestly, in this day and age, we should be doing them pretty much every time, anytime a car has any kind of decently sized hit on it, because there's a chance it could knock the alignment out. The flip side is the insurance company going to pay you to do it? All those kind of things, right? Even if we recommend it. Right? So tools we use to justify suspension is pictures, is the suspension component, alignment printouts for sure, the damaged part itself, right? But there's a lot of times when we have damaged suspension components that are not something that our eye can actually see, right? The machine may tell us, our technician may come to us and say, boss, I've done 150 of these damn things. I'm telling you right now, we're going to need a knuckle hub, strut, bearing, right? But if we can't prove it to the insurance company, that becomes just like Jose told me he needs 5 hours on that camera. We play the same game with the suspension, wouldn't you agree? They'll come back and say, oh, well, he says that you need that, but you can't prove it to me, so I'm going to just throw a strut on it. We're just going to throw pieces at this damn thing until we get in alignment, right? Which is horrible for us. That I call it the wait and see method. It's horrible for us because of this. We end up with upset customers, when we don't get the alignment the first time, and now we need a knuckle, now we need a hub and bearing. You see what I mean? We just keep rolling. All of a sudden, you've done 3 alignments, and the car's been there for an extra week and a half, right? So there are some things that you can do about that, right? There's equipment out there now that you can use to measure. You know what? I'll talk about that a little bit when we get a little further. But There are tools that you can buy at your shop level now that actually measure suspension if you don't have an alignment machine. Spineezy makes a machine that does it, and Caroliner, from what I understand. Yeah, Point X is a comparison measurement, so it's good as long as you have a good side, right? But I have heard that Caroliner is actually putting data into their system now where it's going to have suspension data in there. So it will actually come back and tell you if the suspension has been, supposedly that's happening right now. I don't know if anybody has experienced that yet with Caroliner. Spineezy already has it. You can get a caster camber toe reading from a Spineezy measuring system, even when you're just doing structure, right? So it's a structure measuring system that you can use on your frame machine to pull a car back, but you can back into place, but you can also use it to measure suspension. The reason why I'm talking about this babble is the wait and see method. Part of the reason why we have to do the wait and see method is because we can't prove to them what we need and why we need it, right? If you have a printout that actually shows caster camber toe and your tech says, I need these parts, and the printout supports what you're needing, you're going to have a lot better shot at getting that on the first run, right? And getting those suspension pieces ordered in here and not doing this wait and see method that we do right now, right? But it really just goes back to a lot of the stuff that we don't do a very good job. And I realize those machines are expensive, but we don't really prove to the insurance company what it is that we actually need. Do you agree with that? So if you can get to the point where you can prove that, then you're going to get a better result. I will tell you something about insurance adjusters, and maybe some of y'all have figured this out or felt that, when you're dealing with them. Most of them, though, there's always the outliers that are, crazy, right? But the big girth of the majority of them, if you give them a piece of paper to prove why you need what you need, they're most likely going to pay you. The same thing holds true for an invoice, right? If you've ever had a special color come in, which I'm sure everybody in this room has, right? And you had to get some specialty toner, and you look at the estimate, and you're like, there's no way in hell I can paint this car for $380 of paint material. So you do what? You create an invoice for that toner, and when you hand the invoice to the adjuster and tell them, look, it's a specialty toner on this red, I had to order it, here's the invoice, do you get a lot of pushback? Or do they pay you?
They pay.
They pay, yeah.
Except for documentation.
Yeah, right, like I said, there's always an exception, right? So you know what I mean? There's always that person, right, that's nuts, like I like to say. But for the majority of them, if you give them something that justifies what you're asking for, you're going to have a lot better shot at getting it. Most of them are just going to give it to you because, quite honestly, I've talked to them. Most of these insurance adjusters and appraisers, what they're scared of is when they leave your shop that they've given you something that now someone at their company is going to look at the file and say, why did you do that? There's no proof that they needed this. Why did you give them this stuff? But if you give them paperwork that they can put in their folder, so when their boss calls them to the table and says, why did you do this? They can say, this is why. Then they're much more apt to pay for this stuff. Again, you've always got some crazy people, but the majority of them are not going to fight you on that stuff. So an alignment printout is one of those things that can save you an exorbitant amount of time. I mean, how much time do you spend right now when this wait and see method happens at your store where we start throwing a part at a time on a car? And how long does that car stay there? And even though it's not our fault, who ends up being pissed off at the end? The customer's pissed off at the end. And when they're pissed off and they leave your shop and they're mad like they had a bad experience, what happens?
They're not coming.
They ain't coming back, and they're telling their friends and family that you guys suck, right? And it had nothing to do with us, So part of the way we can head that off is make sure that we have that kind of paperwork to justify what we need. So I talked about that, delaying and alignment, delay of parts, right? When we play this wait and see method with parts, is that next part that we need always available, sitting at the store somewhere, and they're willing to just run it all over? No. We can throw a strut on, and then we need a knuckle, and guess what? We got to order it. It's 3 days out, or whatever it might be. So it causes all kinds of issue. Lost time. The other thing, too, that that, yeah, we upset our customer, maybe get bad CSI, all those things. The productivity of your technician goes to hell in a handbasket when they're just throwing one part on at a time and realigning it and playing that game. So there's that too, okay? So just real quick to look at these next few slides are just pictures. Somebody told me that these parts were actually parts at shops that were actually damaged, that was missed, is what they told me, but I find that hard to believe because that looks like came from a used salvage lot to me. And plus, if you missed that knuckle broken too, you really should find something else to do for a living, quite honestly. I had the other thing broken in half, hopefully we can catch that, right?
He's right.
I know, right? I would be surprised. So there's that broken knuckle. Again, we should catch those things. Other things to look at. They're real easy to see when you've got the whole component out of the car, right? But verify the strut angle. I'll tell you if it's bent. Look for things like where brake sensors and lines are attached. Are they bent, damaged, right? Sway bar bushings or any kind of bushing that's been moved. I think I've got a better picture of one of those. Right? Look where they connect, where the control arms go. Is there any movement there? Right? If you can, suspension parts have been on those cars forever. If they move just a little bit, you'll be able to see that they've moved. And if they've moved, then it at minimum needs an alignment, right? Probably needs parts, but at minimum it needs an alignment. There's the one I was looking for. If you see a sway bar like that, and that's usually what happens when, metal that's been behind a bushing for 20 years or however long, it's even 5 years, what it looks like when they shift, right? And that should be a visual indicator of something is a miss, right? Something is not good. Quite honestly, if we miss the egg on the tire, again, I'm kind of back to we should probably find something else to do for a living. Right? This is easy stuff, right? If you see damage on the wheel and the tire like that, then definitely tells us we had impact and definitely tells us we need alignment and that there might be something bent back there, right? So this flaking thing, this all works real good. If you'll notice my ex-boss, there's a Minnesota sweatshirt back in there. Well, this fool grew up in Minnesota. So in Minnesota, I found out they've got a huge advantage over us when it comes to suspension because all their crap rusts. And when it rusts and these things get hit, the rust flakes off when they get damaged. And when the rust flakes off, it tells you that the metal moved. And according to what I'm told, the insurance industry up in the north is very used to paying for suspension when rust gets blown off, when it gets moved because it tells them that it's been moved. Unfortunately, in Texas, we don't have a whole lot of that, right? So that's not a big help. But we do get flaking, right? I mean, sometimes it has that black paint or whatever on it, if the paint's flaking off, or if it does have rust on it, which can happen too. Maybe down here more than it does in Dallas with the, ocean and stuff being here. You might see that. And if you do see that flaking off, then that tells you that thing's bent, Still not may want them to pay for it. That's a bad slide. What that slide's saying is back in the day is bill on a 2-for-1 basis, so bill 2 body hours for every mechanical. That's a horrible freaking way to go about things. Should have been that slide. What you need to do if you've got technicians that are doing mechanical and body, especially for my owners in here, set them up with 2 different pay rates in your system. Pay them a flag hour on body and a flag on mechanical if you're paying flag, right? If you're paying them, a salary plus commission or something else, then that's a different story. But if you're paying them on the flag hour, pay them whatever. Like, I don't know what the going rate for body techs is in Houston right now. Let's just say it's 20, and your mechanic probably is making 28. I don't know. Is that right? So with that said, that tech, if he's doing body and mechanical, he should have 2 different rates set up in your computer. One when he does body, one when he does mechanical. Why do I say that? For my managers and owners in here. Your profitability on setting it up that way on your mechanical labor skyrockets, right? If you bill on a 2-for-1 basis, you will only keep the labor GP that you have for body, right? Which runs around 60% as a norm. If you run mechanical labor through, like I just gave you that scenario, and you're selling the labor at 100 or whatever it is, you're going to be somewhere in the 70s on gross profit percentage. Make sense? So the tech makes out pretty good that way, and the shop definitely